Good evening, everybody. Hello. We are here to welcome you to um, another edition of Virtual Princeton Public Library here on Crowdcast. This is our home where we often do things like author talks, but we're expanding and trying out different areas, such as crafting classes like we have tonight. We're going to have a music program coming up for Mother's Day with Fred Miller. And we're going to actually start hosting Princeton Tech Meetup on here. So you're going to be able to tune in while we transition to this new environment. I see I have some glare going tonight that I don't normally have. Let me just turn that around to try and make it a little bit better, but I'm not going to be the focus for long anyhow. Really, we're here tonight to welcome Marisa Simon of Pennington Quilt Works, and also who is known on social media as Stitching Pink. So if you want to, oops, we are. Marissa's there fiddling around in the corner.
My camera flipped around, so we'll have to just.
Okay, so ignore the woman in the corner. We have a complex setup here tonight. We have Marisa here. We worked on this a lot yesterday on her laptop as well as her camera so we can get a proper demonstration going. And she's also going to do a little slideshow for us. So as I was saying, on social media, Marisa is known as Stitching Pink. She also does Stitch It Good show on WPRB. She is a quilting sewing educator at Pennington Quilt Works, as well as a sewing machine specialist for Bernina. Is that how you say that? Actually,
Bernina.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I am not much of a sewer. I have done some sewing with Marisa. She has gotten me into it. She's managed to have me make a pillowcase, some keychains. I even made a cute little bag with one. So if Marisa can get myself sewing and maker, and she's worked with us at the library on a lot of different projects for Maker Day, New Jersey Maker Day, and we had a really great project plan for New Jersey Maker Day, but we're going to do it at some point, which was to make dog beds to donate to the shelters. We had really cute patterns picked out and material, but we're still going to do that whenever we can. So we like to work with Pennington Quilt Works. They're a great supporter of the library in general, always so generous in donating us sets of machines that we can use for classes and Maker Day and their time. So we are, encouraging you to support all small businesses in the area. And so tonight, this event is brought to you by Pennington Quilt Works. And in the box below my head, you can see it says EPP Starter Kit. So this is an English paper piecing starter kit that Pennington Quilt Works has made available. It has all the tools that you need. Then you just got to supply your own fabric. And what we're planning to do, we had originally planned an event that was going to be called a Stitch Out, where it was going to be like stitching in public, where people could either do embroidery or needlepoint or EPP as it's known. And we were going to stitch out, we were going to do it on the plaza. Since we can't do that, we're going to probably set up a Google Meets at some point in May. So be watching for that on our calendar, where we can all bring together with our whatever piece of project we're stitching and get together and just talk about what we stitch, share our stitching, and share some time together as stitching enthusiasts. I do like to do embroidery and cross stitch, and I am planning to learn EPP. I think this is something I can do. I need something new to relax myself. And so I am really thrilled to be watching this demo tonight. So I'm going to turn off the chat while Marisa is doing her demonstration, but we'll bring it back at the end. If you want to ask Marisa a question, or at the end, there will be time for question and answer as well as some chat. There is an ask a question function. If you go in and you look at the questions, you can upvote any question that you feel is particularly important to ask. And again, there's these little polls that we set up just for fun, something to make you feel more engaged. And I'm so glad we have, Marisa, we have 32 people on our call right now, which is great.
I see 49.
Oh, 49 registered.
49. 32 people here. That's great. It's exciting. Hopefully more.
Yeah, and the people that registered, a lot of times people will register for a crowdcast and then they'll get sent the link to watch the replay. So okay. If they can't watch it real time, they register so that they get the link for the replay. And this will also be up on our channel for replay afterwards if you watch tonight and you want to share it with other friends who couldn't be here. Yeah, we got someone here from the Jersey Shore who's getting blown away. We're getting blown away here in Princeton as well, actually. We had someone here from California, and people who people here who are wanting to learn quilting, have never quilted before, people who like to quilt. Someone is sewing. Who is sewing while they watch? Gay is sewing while she watches. We got South Jersey checking in, and Kyle, who was at our library as our artist in residence earlier, who does a lot of stitching, is here. I think Kyle will probably be our next craftist on this channel to appear. I'm talking to her about that. So it's a really good crowd. So I think we're all settled in with who's going to be here. I always like to give 5 or 10 minutes of chatter because people are busy and they might not be here directly at 7.
Okay.
So I think we introduce Marisa, our expert for the night. So I'm going to go make myself a little in the corner and not interrupt anymore. Marissa's going to do a little slideshow to introduce us, and then she's going to do some actual demonstrations.
So can I talk a little bit first before we go to the slideshow? Is that okay?
Yep, that's up to you. I'm going to focus. Okay. You're controlling the slides. I'm going to make you the focus.
Okay. All right. Thanks. Hi. This is actually very exciting because I curled my hair for the first time in probably 6 weeks. So I appreciate the invite for just the opportunity to actually get dressed and like do my hair and put on a little makeup and be a little fancy tonight for you. So I'm going to talk just briefly kind of about how I came to this craft and where I am with it right now, and how I'm adjusting to life with this, how I'm using this craft right now as a coping skill, and how I've actually, how it's evolved for me over the last few years, and also some of the people who have been inspirations for me. I certainly am not the first person who's ever done this. There's a strong history of women and men who have been English paper piecing. So we'll talk a little bit about that, and we'll do a demo. I'll show you some pictures, and I love taking questions about this. So you can certainly, ask away. I have nothing to do for the rest of the night, as I'm sure many of you also are just kind of chilling out. So all right, so I just wrote up a few things. I'm not going to be too speechy, but just wanted to make sure that I give you a little bit background about me and a little bit about the craft as well. So I've been thinking a lot about this demonstration because it's the first time I've done an actual online demo. I teach a lot in person. And I also was concerned and really thinking about this because so much of what I do, and the reason why I love English paper piecing, is that it's on the go. And so that I'm often taking this, if you live in Princeton, you may have seen me at Small World or the Princeton Public Library or Jam and Crepes, or just pick your favorite spot. Gluing paper and stitching paper, or maybe doing embroidery. And so it's been a real adjustment for me to do this craft kind of by myself, but I've been creative, and I'm going to share with you some of those things. At the beginning of the year, I gave a lecture, my first large-scale lecture to 200 quilters about my EPP journey. We call it EPP, it's English paper piecing. And at the time of the lecture, I was thinking a lot about what this craft meant to me and why I was so drawn to it and why it was so important. And what I realized as I was putting the lecture together and going through my photos is that there were actually a lot of photos of me stitching, like you can see one of my ones here, maybe in the corner, with coffee and out and about. And so it made me really think about how versatile this had been for me. But then also I started reflecting on all the stories that people would tell me, and the strangers that would come up to me and start talking to me, and conversations about their own craft or their own creative outlet. I hear a lot about grandmothers' sewing machines and moms and aunts and learning to sew as children, or sometimes I hear horror stories about home ec. It's not that bad. A lot of stories, horror stories about zippers. But anyway, so people talk to me a lot. And what I began to realize as I went through my photos and thinking back about those moments when I was stitching, either here in Princeton or abroad or on travels, is that those stories that had been shared with me had become part of my work. And that my work wasn't just my own journey, but that by taking it into the public sphere, I had invited other people in, and their stories were now stitched into my stitching. And it became incredibly powerful for me and really motivating. And I'm really motivated and and get enthused about the idea of stitching in public, which is one of the reasons why Janie and I came up with that project. So when social distancing started, I really struggled. And sitting here by myself and stitching, I was lonely. My family doesn't quite appreciate it the way I do. We got a new puppy. I just felt like I wasn't able to do my craft. But then I do facilitate English paper piecing classes at Pennington Quilt Works, and I have a group that meets every month. We've been meeting, it's actually our 5th year. And what I did is I started virtual stitching groups with them, and I invited stitchers from all across the country, and including my mother in Oklahoma. And everybody gets together and they share and they stitch and they tell us what they're stitching. And it's been a great opportunity for me to get to know these women in a different way, but also a way for us to support each other and share what we're making, and take a little bit of a break from the stress in the moment that we're all experiencing. So now once again, here I am, even though I'm at home, while I'm stitching, these stories that these women are sharing with me, my friends and my fellow stitchers, are now also part of my work and are really inspiring me to keep going and to find new meaning and value in this work. So I wanted to just switch over to a little bit of a PowerPoint. I'm not going to spend too much time with that because it can be kind of boring. And then I will do a live demo. And I'm very excited because Janie and I spent a lot of time figuring out how to do that. And then I'm certainly open to taking your questions. And I grabbed a lot of things I've made, and I'll talk to you a little bit about kind of my philosophy of making and my philosophy around what we're talking about is slow stitching. Talk about slow food, analog living, kind of going back to this non-digital life. And certainly when you're doing English paper piecing, it's a very slow craft, but there's value in that. So let me toggle over to my screen. So just stay with me for 1 sec. And I'm going to do a screen share. We're going to pop up my PowerPoint. So I'm just going to briefly kind of go over a little bit about what is English paper piecing. So English paper piecing actually originated in the early 1700s in England, and so therefore the name. And in the beginning, the shapes were usually squares and triangles. In the late 1700s, we start to see what you see here, which is the hexagon shape. And there are many reasons for that. There's one historian said that it could be that women were being more educated and the use of more different mathematical shapes. But the hexagon, when you actually look at art, is a very, very popular shape that's used in buildings, and you see it on the floors. And so it makes sense, and it's also really versatile, and it's this six side, it's a very comforting shape to work with. And it's actually the shape that I always encourage new stitchers to start with. So Americans didn't do as much English paper piecing because you remember we were a new country, though we certainly did have English settlers who were bringing over their craft. And actually English paper piecing was considered a kind of high quilting. It took a lot of time. You need to have access to paper. Paper was very expensive. It can be a little wasteful with fabric. But Americans certainly were not in that kind of situation. So they often did a lot of hand piecing, though we do see English paper piecing as the United States became a little more comfortable. And as women also were quilting, not just for utilitarian use, but also for decorative arts. So it kind of went away for a while. And actually this block that you see here, I made, I always think things in terms of how old my daughter was. So I think she was 2. So I probably made this about 13 years ago. And I decided that I wanted to learn how to English paper piece, but there were not many books out there. And I found one woman who had put together a pamphlet that she was selling on eBay. And this is what came with it. So I made about 3 or 4 of these. And then I quickly realized, this is called the Grandmother's Flower Garden. And I quickly realized why, which is that I was going to be a grandmother before I ever finished this. And as much as I loved it and enjoyed it, and I loved the comfort of the stitching and the fact that I could take it everywhere, it just didn't really excite me as much as I had hoped it would be. And though the joke is that I worked at Pennington Quilt Works back then, and I said, oh, we should have an English paper piecing class. And I quickly learned that the response to that was, well, that's great. You can teach yourself and you can teach the class. So I kind of put it aside until about 5 or 6 years ago, when English paper piecing started becoming really popular, and on Instagram and Pinterest, and there was this renewed interest in really slowing everything down. So when I was up in Maine, this was in 2015, so it was 5 years ago, almost 5 years ago, I saw this book, which is amazing. This is Willine Hammerstein wrote this. That's Millefiori Quilts. And her book is just stunning. She is Danish. She actually is a lawyer in The Hague, incredibly bright woman, very creative. And she does all of her quilts by hand. She doesn't do English paper piecing, interestingly enough, but they're all very mathematical and stunning. But I was smart enough to know that that was not the quilt that I should start with, but I knew that I wanted to do that quilt. And I am working on that quilt, and this will be the quilt that I'm doing when I'm a grandmother. So I decided that I wanted to teach this, and there was no way I was going to have a finished quilt to teach it. And I went on the hunt for a really great beginner project. And I came across what's called the Smitten Quilt. And it is designed by a woman, Lucy Kingwell, who lives in Australia. She is the daughter of a very famous quilter, Jen Kingwell, also in Australia. And I decided that I wanted to make this quilt because not only did I love the size of it and the shape of it, but also I have a daughter named Lucy, and Lucy's mother, Jen Kingwell, is a nurse midwife, as am I, also a nurse midwife who is not practicing anymore, and a quilter. And so I felt that it was destiny that I was going to teach this. And so I taught this quilt along with the owner of Pennington Quilt Works and a good friend of mine, Liz, who works with Free Spirit Fabrics. And we taught this as a year-long course, and many people finished the quilt, and some people, maybe they're on here, are still working on it. And so this is, I think this is most of my finished quilt. I think it's kind of cut it out. But the quilt itself has 140 different fabrics. And this is when I really started falling in love with it, because I mixed in fabrics, some fabrics that were from my childhood that my mother had used to make quilts for me. Some were newer fabrics. It looks very retro, but it was actually quite modern. And the other thing is that I stitched this everywhere. And my family also became very attached to this quilt because I could work on it while I sat with them instead of hiding away in my sewing room, hunched over my sewing machine. So I'm going to end this screen share here and kind of come back to you briefly. I think. So, okay. So I continued to explore the world of English paper piecing and came across a number of other quilters, and many of them are Australian. And I have all this listed in the resources that I believe Janie can send out to you. And Sue Daly is a huge inspiration to me, and one of really the great English paper piecers working right now, and certainly a wonderful businesswoman. I had the opportunity to take a class with her last year, and she just was very inspiring. So I watched a lot of her videos. Also, Marge Sampson George. I pull out some of my books. So Marge Sampson George, you can see it's just one of the quilts that she made. She certainly continued to inspire me. Bridget Giblin, Judy Newman, Judy Godfrey. Also, so there's a lot of young women who are doing it. So I found that there were just what was exciting is that this craft had modernized itself, and the prints were exciting, and the way it was being incorporated into quilts, and It wasn't just that kind of that old fussy, that like the block that you saw. So I also learned that there were Americans doing it, and I came across the videos of Diane Gilliland, who's Crafty Pod on YouTube. I watched all of her videos over and over again and read her book, All Points Patchwork, which I really consider is the English paper piecing Bible. So between all of these, I learned to English paper piece. And over the last 5 years, I have had the pleasure of teaching hundreds of quilters how to English paper piece. And it's really, I feel like spreading the good word of English paper piecing. And I love talking about it, and I get really jazzed and pumped up about it. And I'm hoping that you will, at the end of this, feel the same way. But like any craft, anybody who does any sort of art, we develop opinions about how we like to do things. So the benefit of having done this over a number of years and taken some workshops and explored various techniques is I've kind of come up with my own, but I'm also always changing what I'm doing, kind of depending on the different project that I'm doing. So today I'm going to show you kind of the basics. We're going to start with the hexagon, and because I think it's the gateway shape, as I like to joke, it's the perfect size to work with. And I'll talk to you a little bit about how we talk about sizing with hexagons. And I'm hoping that you will be inspired by this, and I encourage you to look on Instagram and Pinterest. There's a lot of really great stuff out there, and it's also a nice craft. Though I love doing it on the go, I have found it really comforting here at home to come in, use my scissors, slow down, turn off the news, put on some nice music, and just sit and sew and just enjoy the process. So now we're going to talk a little bit about English paper piecing. So what I have on here, actually, this is one of the blocks I made about 6 years ago, when I first started. And this is designer Heather Ross, who is one of my favorite designers. She's actually, you may recognize some of her prints. Here's another one of hers. Let's see if I have her upside down. And her prints are just delightful. And she also wrote a wonderful memoir called How to Catch a Frog, which I recommend if you're looking for something lovely to read, that you check that out. So you'll see here that if you can look, this is thread basted, which is the traditional way of thread basting. But we're not going to do that today. We're actually going to do glue basting, which is a more modern way of doing this, and it's a little bit faster. But I certainly like to teach people in real life how to do this as well, because heaven forbid in a snowstorm or a pandemic, you run out of glue, you need to do that. So I'm going to put these aside, and I'm going to show you the supplies that you would need. So I put together this kit, and that's what I see that there's a little link to it. So I'm going to put away my notes here. So this is everything that you need to get started. And so we use a glue, and I'm going to do some gluing, so you're going to see that in a minute. Then I use an acrylic template, and when you use the template, you take the paper off. But these are my templates I get from a U.S. business called Paper Pieces out of Paducah, Kentucky, and they're just lovely people. Then the hexagons, these are 1-inch hexagons, and the way we measure them is actually along this short side. So that's a 1-inch hexagon. And I have some other sizes that I pulled out so I can show you. And then you can reuse these papers. You can certainly make your own papers, but because it's a slow craft, there are parts of it that I choose to speed along. And so I prefer not to cut my own papers. I'm happy to support another another small business and have them cut the papers, and I can reuse them multiple times, and I'll talk about what that means. I use 60 weight polyester thread and not cotton, which people are always shocked about, because when you're doing this, you're actually going to be dragging the thread across the paper. And you can imagine the friction of dragging the thread across the paper. You're going to start shredding your thread. And it's really disappointing to have stitched a number of tiny little stitches and have your thread break. So I have found that this is a 60 weight decabob, and it never breaks. Super bob, it doesn't break. And then I also like to use, So this is another thread. This is an 80 weight thread. It's called the Deco Bob from Wonderfill. I like that as well. It's very, very thin, but both of these will work. Then this is the part where people get a little scared. So these are very thin needles. You can't really see the package here, but it's a size 11 milliner. And just to not get too in the weeds, but a milliner needle, there's many different kinds of needles. And a milliner needle is a needle where the eye of the needle is about the same width as the shaft of the needle. And so what that means is that as you pull the needle through, because the eye is so narrow, you're not going to leave a large hole there. So if you use a sharp needle, where the eye is a little bit wider, you might leave a little bit more of a hole, and you can kind of see your stitches as you go along. That said, this is what I recommend, but I also think it's really important that you find needles that you like the most. So this is what I put in here. They're only $3 or $4. So, and I have a variety of needles also myself, because sometimes depending on my hands are sore or the kind of fabric I'm working with, I might change to a different needle. But so that's a little bit about needles. It's actually really fascinating, I think. And then I love Wonder Clips, and they are wonderful. They're probably one of my favorite little craft notions. I have them all. They can pretty much be found all over our house. I even used them the other day to, my husband needed a haircut and I need to put his hair up, and I didn't have clips, but I had Wonder Clips. So this is the life of living with a quilter. You get your haircut with Wonder Clips holding your hair up. So anyway, and I will show you a little bit about how I use those and why I think they're so important, particularly when you're new. And then this little kit also, just for fun, comes with a pair of scissors, but we're going to talk about what kind of scissors I like to use. So that's the kit that is on there. And the only thing you need to add to that, because I really wanted to make sure people could take it home and get started, is fabric. So as far as fabric, I like to use just your basic quilting cotton. And you can buy that at any local quilt store. No matter where you are. I know a lot of the quilt stores might be closed, but they're doing curbside pickup. I know that Pennington Quilt Works is, and a number of the other stores in the New Jersey area and beyond. So I find that it's a nice weight, but I also like to work with a fabric called Liberty, and I'll show you that from Liberty of London, which is a nice fine fabric as well. So I'm going to, let me just make sure, I'm going to go back to my notes here that I haven't missed anything. Wonder Clips. Oh, so you can, if some of you out there who are rotary cutters, if you're quilters, you may have a rotary cutter. You can rotary cut your pieces, but again, because it's slow stitching, I have actually found I'm getting slower and slower, and I like to trace out what I'm doing with a pencil or a pen. Doesn't really matter because it's in the seam allowance. And then I cut it with scissors. So it's really important to have a good pair of scissors. Just, you know, any time you have a hobby, it's often about the gear. So these are a nice pair of Ginger scissors that I have. You don't want anything too long because we're not cutting garments, so we're not cutting large pieces of fabric here. I also love the Fiskars micro tip scissor, which is a little more economical, but it's like a fantastic scissor. These, well, none of us are going on planes right now, but eventually, someday, hopefully, we will go on a plane. If you travel, I would never take my good scissors, but the Fiskars micro tips, they're $15, which is expensive. It's a nice pair of scissors, but my heart isn't going to be crushed if they accidentally get taken away. But they shouldn't. They should actually be the right size. So, and then you need to have a pencil, and just a number 2 pencil is fine. Again, you're going to be cutting on that, so it's not as much of an issue. So I'm going to get my template here. I like to use old things. This is an old Jello mold that it actually isn't usable anymore because they rust. I tried it and the Jello came right out of it. Okay, so I have my template here. You can see I've taken that paper off of it, and now I'm going to put it onto my fabric and trace off. So I have this lovely bright yellow fabric here. And I find when I and crafting or creating or whatever, I strongly believe that you should sew with things that you like to use. So if you don't like to sew with black or gray, or you don't like to sew with yellow or orange, you shouldn't. You should be doing what you like to do. Time is, although now we all have a lot of time, but our time is very stressful. And so we want to make sure we're doing it in the right way. Okay, I'm going to turn my camera a little bit. Okay, so I'm just going to trace this. You know, I'm not being very economical. I'm just going to do a rough trace here. And it doesn't really matter as with traditional quilting because I'm hand stitching this. So my seam allowances, I'm not worried that everything is perfectly a 1/4 inch, which is what you typically do with machine quilting. And the other thing about this is that, what was I going to say? I'm not worried. Oh, my template is 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. So 3/8 of an inch. And that's generally the size I like to have. I'm just going to cut this out. And the reason is it gives you a little bit of wiggle room in case your fabric isn't exactly the way you want it to be, or you want to get a certain motif in. And it just gives you a little nicer, a little bit more fabric to work with. So I'm going to put that aside. So now I have my piece and I have my paper. And as I said before, this is how I'm measuring it. This is a 1-inch hexagon. I'm going to turn this to the wrong side. And I love glue. So this is the Soline glue pen. It is a starch-based glue that comes in different colors. I think I put in pink for our viewing pleasure today. And it washes right out. It doesn't stain your fabric. And it actually works as a little bit of a starch, which is really nice when you start sewing these together. So I'm going to put a dot of glue right on the paper. I hope you can see this. And then I'm going to glue all around. So when I glue, I don't want to be heavy with this glue, even though it's inexpensive, but you go through a lot. In fact, 1 tube of the glue will glue 100 hexagons, just to give you an idea. So I'm going to go along here, and I hope you can see that you can see a little bit of the white. So I'm not going to go all the way up to the edge, and I'm not going up to the fabric. And now I'm going to fold this over. But I'm not going to fold it too tight, and I'll explain why as I start stitching. And then I'm going to work my way around. So once you get going with this, once you get going with this, it can go very fast. And this is the perfect thing to do sitting in front of the television. Because you can, I'll just get a tray and I just sit there and glue. All right, so I've glued all of them. And here's my nice little center. But I'm going to show you one other way to do it. If for some reason you can't find your template, which is why I recommend putting your initials on it because they are clear, or you are just being fast, a 1-inch hexagon, you can use a 2.5-inch square. So these I've just cut into a square. I'll take my paper again. And you have a couple of options. But I'm just going to show, I'll just show you this one. Maybe I'll show you both. How much time do we have? We have time. So you could, now that you glue this, come along here and just clip these. So I don't even need a template. And then go back and glue. Again, I'll show you. Just a little bit of glue. So even on this side, you'll see I do put a little bit of glue on the fabric, but that's on the wrong side, so that's fine. And then I'm just going to quickly work around. So I'm really pushing from here and putting it over. I'd rather it be underglued than overglued because you have to take these papers out at some point. And if there's too much glue, it's really painful. So the other way to do it, let me grab another piece of fabric. You never knew there were so many different ways to glue fabric down, did you? Okay, so then the other way that's super, super fast, and this is, I feel like this is kind of like a utilitarian way of doing this, is I put this right on the square, and I'm not even going to trim it off. So this is if you're traveling and you're not going to have scissors with you, you don't want to bring them with you, you can just cut a bunch of 2.5-inch squares, or I actually just kind of keep them cut all the time so I can grab a bunch if I'm going somewhere. I want to do something kind of mindless. And now I can glue this. So you'll see there's a little bit of extra fabric there. We don't care about that. It's fine. Again, it's the wrong side of the quilt, and it's not going to make a difference. It doesn't affect how you put anything together. And it does make the whole process a lot faster. Okay. So these are so this, you can use the template. This is a square cutting off those triangles, or this one was a square where I didn't do anything. And you can see that there's really no difference on the back, but really no difference on the front. Okay, so that's enough glue. So we've got that. And through the miracle of, I don't know, what is this, virtual life, I actually have one ready for you. So the other reason why I love Wonder Clips is that I can clip my pieces together. So I had prepared this. So I have my center. And the other reason why I love English paper piecing is I love fabric. And this is a really fun way to use all those great fabrics that I've collected over the years. So this is your traditional hexagon flower. Again, there are so many shapes, but it really is the easiest one to work with. And so I'm going to do a little bit of sewing here, but before we start sewing, we have to thread our needle. And believe it or not, there is a technique for this. And I have made videos that are on my YouTube channel. And the only videos up there are just some instructional English paper piecing videos. And I believe we'll send you those resources at the end. Okay, so I'm going to thread my needle. And I have my handy little tool here. This was designed by Sue Daly. So of course I had to buy it. And I cut off a little bit of thread, and I'm hoping you can see this. I can change. Oh, it's so thin. Okay. I'm going to thread this, and then I'm going to show you with some other thread I have, because you're not going to be able to see this. Okay. Let's put that aside, because I have one threaded already. Okay. Let's talk about threading a needle. So when I'm threading a needle, you can use a needle threader, but these needles are really, really tiny little eyes. So I'm going to show you with a larger needle here. So this is what I learned. I think I learned this either from my mom or my grandmother, and probably both. So I'm going to take the thread and drape it over the needle. And I'm going to hold that between my thumb and my forefinger very tightly. And then I'm going to quickly pull. You may not be able to see this very well. You can watch the videos too. And I'm going to open up my thumb and forefinger, and there's this little tiny bead of thread. And I'm going to keep that squished pretty tight. And then hopefully, my hands are sticky from the glue. Let me try again. Hopefully, yeah. I'm going to saw, I just saw it in. And then what you'll see here is you have a loop. So because this is not thin thread, but when I'm working with the polyester thread, it's so thin that my needle comes out a lot. And there were a few mishaps in our family where my husband may have sat on a needle. So I learned how to tie on my needle. So I have this loop. I'm going to take the needle through this loop and pull. And now my needle is not going to come off. So it's on here. So this is a great method, not just for English paper piecing, but it's also a fabulous method if you're working with slippery threads with embroidery. So I use this all the time. I tie my thread on all the time whenever I'm doing any sort of hand sewing. So the other thing we're going to do is what's called a quilter's knot. I just made a video for this today, so you can watch that on my YouTube channel. I'm going to put the thread behind the needle, and I'm going to wrap it around we're going to say 3 times because this is pretty thick, but with a really thin thread, I'm going to probably do 6 or 7 times. So I'm going to do that again. I'm going to bring the thread behind. I'm going to wrap around 3 times. Then I've got these 3 wraps, and I'm going to bring it between my thumb and my forefinger and pull down. And as I pull it down, I've got my knot at the end. I don't know if you can see that very well. That's pretty tiny. So this is the knot that I use. A lot of people have learned a similar knot from maybe from a grandparent or their mother, or from a quilting teacher, where you rub it between your thumb and your forefinger, and that's fine too. So I have my knot. Okay, so we're going to put that away. Let's go back to our piece here. I'm going to try threading that needle again. Oh, wait, what do I have here? Do I have a needle threaded? Okay, let's thread the needle. And when I teach in real life, in person, this is the part that can be really frustrating for people. And so I often will go ahead and thread needles. And because I don't want anybody to give up because of threading a needle, or if this needle is too tiny, then we just switch to another needle. So I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to put that loop through. And now I've tied this on. I'll do my quilter's knot. I feel like watching me do that. I hope it's not like watching paint dry. I don't know. Maybe it is. Okay. So I'm going to sew one together. So I didn't really have a plan for this, but if I do have a plan, I like to have my pieces out in front of me. And this is where having camera phones is really great, because if you decide you want to lay out, you can just take a picture of it, so you don't have to worry about remembering. You can also come back here and do numbers, but that's another class. Okay, so let's do this. So I'm going to put these 2 together, and when you first start, you find you're just gripping everything really tightly. So I clip it over here to one side, and now I'm going to come up into the seam allowance here on one piece, and I always stitch away from me because I find it safer, and that's just the way I've learned. But I do know people who stitch towards themselves. But when I was worked as a midwife and you're doing surgery, you certainly never sew towards yourself. So now I'm going to go corner to corner. Okay, and I'm going to go through once, and then I'm going to go corner to corner again. And now I'm going to do something called a figure 8 knot. Again, you may not be able to see this very well here. So afterwards, when you get that list, you can head over and take a look at my videos. And I'm going to come over. So what I'm doing, it's also like a knicker knot. And what it does is it just makes a really tight knot at the beginning. And now I'm going to do what's called the whip stitch. If you do a lot of reading about English paper piecing, the people have opinions about whip stitch or a flat back stitch or a ladder stitch. I have found that the whip stitch is the easiest to learn. And so what I'm going to do, see if I can get my lining a little better here, is I'm just taking my needle from front to back, and I'm not going through the paper. Let me see if you, I don't know if you can see this. On the paper, there's maybe 2 or 3 threads from the fabric, and I'm picking those up. So the other advantage of using a really thin needle is that it's actually quite hard to go through the paper. I do find in the beginners tend to, what you'll see along the edge of their paper are lots of little perforations, but as you get more comfortable with it, you don't do that. So I'm going to go again front to back, and I just continue all the way across. And you find your rhythm, and it depends on the fabric, and it depends on what's going on in my life. Sometimes my stitches are really close together. Sometimes they're far apart, and I just let the it's like whatever's going on in my life, and that's the energy that's being put into the piece. So in general, I like to aim for about 15 stitches to the inch, which isn't excessive in any way. And it depends on what also I'm doing with it and how small the pieces are, if it's going to be a quilt or if it's going to be something that's going to be appliqued onto, a bag, or maybe it's a wall hanging. Okay, so I'm going to go all the way down, and I go to the end, and I'm going to go through again, corner to corner, go through once, and now I'm going to go through again, do that knot, which I know I do very quickly, but again, you can watch my video. Okay. Now, this is where I always have to have a talk with people. You probably can't see it here, but if you were here with me, you could probably see a little bit of my stitches. And we all just have to make peace with this. This is hand sewing, and people are going to see what we're doing. There are other stitches you can do that can hide your stitching, but you're going to see your threads. And if you look at a lot of older quilts, you can see there are threads too. So we just have to make do with it or not wear our reading glasses. And again, as you go along, your stitches get smaller and you get a little more comfortable with it. When I go back and look at my early pieces from a few years ago, my stitches were a lot more visible. So I'm gonna put this one aside. And I've done another one here. So this is another one I've put together. I think I probably do have a way I want to do that. Yes. Okay. And I've done one side. And then after I did that one side, I came here. I folded this over and I did this side. So I'm actually going to have a crease in the center. Then I come down and work along this way. So I continue in that. So this is, so you're going to go here. You'll go up. And then the fabric, the thread, you can actually travel. You can probably see it here. I just travel in the seam allowance. And then I sew this way. And then I'll continue. So I get to the end here. I go up. I bring my thread. I travel back behind in the seam allowance. And then I'll bring these right sides together and stitch across. And then I continue along in that manner. So the reason why I do that instead of just sewing, like, because oftentimes people have learned or they've taught themselves, or when I first did it, I would just sew each of these hexagons onto the center. And what I found happened is that these little corners were not as neat as I wanted to. And it also meant that then I had to go back and stitch this. And I was constantly tying knots and cutting thread and tying knots and cutting thread. So particularly with polyester thread where it doesn't shred quite as much, I'm not as worried about that. So I try to be the most efficient with the use of it, mostly because I just don't want to be threading needles all the time and tying knots all the time. So to review, I'm going to go this way, up, bring the thread behind, sew across, up, bring the thread behind and sew across. And then I have one more. It's kind of like a cooking video. And then again, Wonder clips are great because then I can clip all these together and I know that they go together. And now this one is at the end. So this is my last one. So I'm just going to do one more demo and show you this. And then we will just let me take a look at my notes and see if there's anything that I haven't told you. Okay. So I'm going to do this one more time. Look at the time here. It's about an hour. Okay. I'm sure many of you, I hope many of you are stitching along, or maybe you're doing some embroidery or knitting. So I have my last one, and you can see these were basted using that square method. I'm going to go up in here, and I'm going to go corner to corner. So when I teach this, it's often hard for quilters because they come and they take a class and they either have a finished block, or if you're making a bag class, you have a finished project. And if we're lucky, after a couple of hours of instruction and cutting and getting comfortable with threading the needle and tying knots, you might have one flower done. So it does get faster. I have found that I'm certainly a lot faster. I think my stitches are probably further apart. But if that is going to frustrate you, then maybe you dabble with this, but it's not something you go too deeply in. Oh, thank you. I see Janie is over there sending you the YouTube links. So you do not see my face in any of those, just so you know. It's just, and they're really, they are, the only techniques in there are how to change your glue, thread your needle, and do the knots. And in the resource list, I've listed other places. There's lots of, like Sue Daly has already done such amazing videos, Jen Kingwell, that there's maybe eventually, maybe depending on how long we're in isolation, maybe I'll make more videos. But for now, I feel like there's a lot of great resources out there that you can do. Okay, so I open that up. I'm not going to continue this now because I know it is a little like watching paint dry. And then I'm going to stitch across here and there, and then I'm finished. So let me show you some of the ones that I've finished. Put my needle away. So this is a project that I was working on where for the English Paper Piecing Club that I helped facilitate, we were swapping fabrics and all from one particular designer. So so here, actually, I'll put them up here. So these were, oh, are we going to do it here? Okay, I'll do it here. So these were some that I made. And, you know, they're all different and they're really very fun. And I really don't know necessarily what I'm going to do. I'm going to pull that one out. With them, I have this idea that I'm going to applique them down, maybe to a background fabric, something like this, and then sew all those squares together. This is a beautiful shot cotton, which is really nice to sew on. So each of these are a little different. This is certainly not your grandmother's flower garden, and these are just 1-inch hexagons. So so one of the questions that I get asked all the time is, when do you take the papers out? So for a shape like this, I would not take any of these papers out if this is going to be a quilt where I'm going to be attaching, you know, more pieces until the piece is surrounded by pieces on all of its sides. So in a hexagon, all 6 sides, a pentagon, all 5 sides. So, so here with this one, I have the papers in, and I can actually take this paper out. So because this is glue basted, I don't need to clip out any threads, and I'm just going to pull this out. And I just pull this back gently and pop out the paper. And I can reuse these. I reuse my papers I reuse them as much as I can, because then I find, well, then I just have more papers to do more projects with until it starts to really lose its shape, or there's just a lot of glue on it, and then I will move on. But I have found in general, I can get about 4 uses comfortably out of one single piece of paper. So I'm happy to support paper pieces and buy their papers. So, but now I'm not going to take out any of these pieces. So actually I have another piece that I can show you. So this is a project I'm working on, and actually you can see behind, well, I'll show you in a second. So this is Liberty Fabrics, and I'm making a bag for maybe visits to the park this summer. And I can only take out, I took out this one, and once I sew that seam, I can take out that one. So I try, but these, because these are exposed, I'm not going to take that out until I'm ready to sew that together, and then I'll take those pieces out. So again, it depends on what you're doing with it. So let me see what my notes are again, and I think we'll switch back to me, Janie, and then I will just kind of hold up some different things that I've been working on. Just make sure I did everything. Okay, so, and then if it's going to be a larger quilt, I do take the papers out as I go, because I have found that, and when I've been teaching, when quilters are making quilts, that if you leave the papers in too long, it actually makes it really heavy and difficult to work with. And you also find that your stitches start to come out. So I'm trying to decrease the amount of tension that I have, on the pieces themselves. And so I also have become a big fan of, I've done 2 complete quilts because they take a fair amount of time, and I have many projects that are in process. So I'm going to hop over to my, oh, one sec. So then you can make your little flower and you can applique it. I've appliqued them to jeans. I actually saw a lot of the designers have been using quilts and quilting motifs in their clothing. So you could certainly applique it to any piece of clothing, a jean jacket, a work shirt, a chambray shirt, a bag. I saw there's somebody, I think one of my friends who's on here sent me a picture of a straw bag that was someone's store-bought, and then they appliqued hexagons to it. And then I've also done some work where I've appliqued, this is vintage tablecloths, and I just appliqued it to that. But at this piece, I don't take the papers out until after I've sewn it, and then I cut out the back. And I don't feel bad about it. I used to feel bad about it, but I don't, because otherwise people throw these things away, and I'm repurposing them. So this is just a lovely little wall hanging that I keep in my sewing room, and it makes me happy. And then I cut out in the back, you can see here, and then I'll take the papers out. So the reason why I leave these papers in until after I've sewn is that it has these really sharp points. And I find that if I don't take the papers out, if I take the papers out, I lose the sharpness of those points, and then it's not as neat as I want it to be. But something like this one, this was a vintage pillowcase that a friend found at a flea market, and she gave it to me. And then I just appliqued, this is a Lucy Boston block. We're going to hop over to my PowerPoint in a second, and I'll show you and talk a little bit about that briefly. And then I just appliqued that. So this was just beautiful fabric that was sent to me that I really, from Free Spirit Fabrics, and I got to play around with it a little bit, and then I appliqued it here. But for this one, I had taken all the papers out because I actually didn't want to cut through the back of this, because I wanted it to be utilitarian. All right, let me just show you a few pieces of my work, because I know we're at an hour, and I know people start to, is that okay, Janie, if I do that? How long do I have?
We can go over the hour, but we also have some
questions first.
Let's do some questions, and then we'll go to the show and tell.
Okay.
We don't. So we have a couple of questions. The most popular one is, I've heard of other people using silk thread. Do you have an opinion on silk thread?
So I do have an opinion on silk thread, which probably doesn't surprise you. So yes, like Liza Pryor, who works with K Facet, she uses 100-weight silk thread, and she ties her needle on. I know a lot of people use it for applique. What I have found is it's just too slippery for me, and so that as I'm sewing, I feel like it's unsewing as I go. And so I don't, with cotton, I have a lot of friction there, and so it's very stable. So whereas silk, it's not for me. And so, and I have some overuse and repetitive use injuries in my fingers. So I find that the polyester 60 weight really is easy on my hands. So that's my answer to that.
Okay.
Okay.
And sorry, I put the questions down. I got to put them up again. Okay. So someone wants to know here, Allison, so the first question was from Gay Bitter. Thank you, Gay. Our next question is from Allison, and Allison wants to know, so you have to make the flower shape, or can this be done in rows?
Good question. So it depends on your project. So in general, if you're going to do the grandmother's flower garden, I do recommend, if you're going to do that quilt, I have one here, like a few blocks here. I do recommend doing this and doing the concentric circles that you're going to do. And you make a lot of these. And then once you make a lot of these, you figure out your layout and you do it that way. When I'm doing other quilts, I find that if you work in rows, let's say your quilt is 50 by 60 and it's English paper piece, what I've seen happen is that someone does a whole row that's 60 inches long, and then they have to sew another row that's 60 inches long, and it is very unwieldy. So I find I like to work in groups, and I do a group, or I'll start at one corner and work my way down. I've done smaller projects where I almost work in L's. So it depends on the project, but I try to not have long seams where I'm having to do battle with fabric.
Okay. And then Robin Hartman, no, Robin, I have sent a document with this in it, but it's good to maybe just list it here.
What was that?
What's the name of your channel? Let me see.
My YouTube channel.
Yeah.
It's all everything about me is Stitching Pink. So if you just, my blog is Stitching Pink, my Instagram is Stitching Pink, Facebook Stitching Pink, and I think YouTube is Stitching Pink.
And why is everything Stitching Pink? Would you like to tell us?
So actually, I was talking to my husband about this the other day. I chose that name, Stitching Pink. I registered that domain in 2000.
Wow.
And I don't even know why, but I have owned that domain for 20 years. And I love the color pink. I've always loved it. It's probably not really a surprise. In fact, when I moved into my first apartment, my mother and I made all of my decor by cutting up a lot of my clothes. And I got pink towels, and she said, you need to get all the pink you want, because when you get married, your spouse is not going to put up with that. And then when I met Mitch and we got engaged, I said, I just wanted to let you know that your whole life is going to be pink. So I think that's how it ever did. I mean, it made the most sense. So, I mean, yeah, I've always said that's who I am. So stitching pink. So I've been that for 20 years. So
now I know Kyle is on this call. Kyle, are you still there? Just put a yes into the chat box. And if you follow Kyle on Instagram, and she's vacuuming the lawn.
The lawn, yep.
Vacuuming the lawn. One thing that she's always talking about is Wonder Clips. And
yes,
I haven't seen anybody else talk about Wonder Clips until this tonight. Like, I thought that was a Kyle thing, but Kyle, yes, we have another Wonder Clip enthusiast here, it sounds like.
And they come in 3 sizes, just so you know. There's mini, regular, and big. And they all.
So do you use the mini for EPP? Do you use the mini?
I use the mini mostly for this, for English paper piecing. See, Kyle, I agree. Wonder Clips are wonderful. But I use the regular. I sew a lot of bags, and they have lots of layers, and you can't pin bags. And I sew with vinyl a lot, and you can't pin vinyl. So I'll use the medium ones. And then when I'm quilting, I'll use when I'm putting a binding on, I'll use the medium or the larger ones. So they all, it's like when you're in a craft and you're doing a craft or quilting, it's all about the gear. So, I'm willing to try anything.
Yeah, gearhead here. Yeah. Okay, so we have another question that's come up.
Okay.
We have somebody here. We have 2 people at least who are still confused about how to travel the thread.
Yeah. Do we have time? Can I show that?
Yeah.
Or so what I mean by traveling the thread.
Can you just do it maybe this way?
I'm just going to do it here. Yeah. So this is my seam allowance. So when I talk about, let me find one I'm doing here. Okay. So I'm going to bring it up like it's up here. Okay. So if I've finished this and the thread is here, but now I need to stitch this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the back, and I am going to just take my needle and kind of weave it into this seam allowance. So nobody's going to see this. And I just bring that back here. And I will bring it up to where I need it to be. So I need it to be here. So now my thread is in place, and I can sew this seam. So if you can see, here's the thread, but it's in the seam allowance. No one's going to see this. It doesn't affect the stitching. And then I will just continue sewing along the other ones. I hope that answers the question. Maybe that's my next video. Okay.
traveling the scene
Yes.
video. That would be a good video.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, hopefully, so I mean, we're really hopeful that we're going to get a chance to stitch together in person. As I said, we're going to do a virtual stitch out. Marissa and I will work together to find a good date to do that. It was supposed to have been this weekend, and of course, we're still sheltering in place and still under quarantine. But this is a great way to bring the sewing community together. Also, Marissa, I know that you haven't been able to go into WPRB to do your show recently, have you?
I have exciting news.
Oh,
So coming in the mail to me soon is a microphone. And so I'm going to get to record my show from my home studio.
yay.
And then it'll be, they'll be streaming it online and actually on WPRB 103.3 FM. So right now the station is functioning and they're playing music, and you can stream it at WPRB.com or you can listen at 103.3 FM, but starting next week. So I was joking with Janie that all of us have had to learn a lot of technology in the last 6 weeks. So I've learned all about streaming and Facebook Live and all sorts of things. And this weekend I get to learn all about GarageBand and how to record a radio show from home. So that's exciting. So that will be back.
And the name of your show, the name of your show on WPRB is?
So the name of my show on WPRB is Stitch It Good, Music You Can Craft To. And the idea is that, you've spent an hour with me. It's like an hour of this. That's what it is. Plus some music. I'm really into cocktail and lounge music right now. So it's a lot of 50s and 60s vibe to it. And then I talk ad nauseum about craft. So it's fun.
Okay, one more question, and then we're going to do a little short show and tell and close this down. What time are you on the radio as we're talking about that?
I don't know. So my normal time is 9 to 11 on Tuesdays, and I'm not sure what the schedule will be. So if you want to know, there's a lot of really great DJs who are going to be doing this. So you can go to the WPRB Facebook page, or you can also follow. So, and then you could also go to my Facebook page, the Stitching Pink Facebook page, and I will post that as soon as I go live. So if I can get it up and going next week, I'll be on the air next week. It might, just have to see how long it takes me to learn that technology. Okay.
Yeah. We've had a few, not actually too bad. I was a little bit worried. We do have a storm going through here. So you've frozen up maybe momentarily for a second or two. So She was just saying, you can go to Facebook, just.
Yep. Oh, you know what? Maybe I'll put
stitching playlist in. You can go back to all your old. You can listen to all your old shows on WPRB through there.
No, you can't. And the reason is that it's because it's a long story. You can't, but you can go see all my playlists and you can play them yourself. But if you follow me on Stitching Pink or Instagram, you pretty much get a gist of what I talk about. So,
okay. So it's music you can craft to, yeah,
it's very fun.
Okay, so let's finish up with a little bit of show and tell, and then I want to thank everybody who's here. And again, this is Crowdcast, Princeton Public Library site with Marissa from Pennington Quilt Works. There's a link there to buy the starter kit. And you guys have been great with your questions and the chat. Keep on chatting. So Marissa, what are you showing us next?
Well, so I'm going to show you this because I made this just a couple of weeks ago, 3 weeks ago.
Wow. And that's all EP?
So the outside of it is all English paper piece. This is by Judy Newman, who's one of those amazing Australian quilters. And then the inside of it is, there's like little pockets in there. The fabric is all by one of my favorite designers, and I recommend everybody check her out. Her name is Tula Pink, and I love her. And this is called Homemade, which is just the perfect fabric to come out at this time. It certainly, obviously, she didn't plan that 2 years ago when she designed it. So anyway, I made this, and I love it. And this is a great starter English paper piecing project if you also machine sew, because you'll have to machine sew that. And I have other projects that don't require that, but I love this. And this, I've been waiting until our patterns came in, but this is available from Pennington Quilt Works, the pattern and all the supplies. So, look for that coming up. And I like, because this also was fast. So not all English paper piecing has to be some mega huge project. But I would like to just click over and tell you the mega huge projects. And I will also say that they're all still in process. So is that okay? We just for a few minutes? Okay. All right. So let's go here. Let me make this bigger. Okay. So we've gone through here. So these are the supplies I talked about. So this is the mega huge project that I.
Oh, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Are you supposed to have your screen up?
Yeah. Oh, you know what? I didn't share it yet. Hold on. I got so excited.
I know.
Share it. I started talking about it. Okay. Okay. All right. Now I can screen. Now I'm screen sharing. Now can you see it?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's scroll through here. Okay. So this is the project that inspired me to get started. And this is Passacaglia by Willine Hammerstein. This is an incredibly popular quilt. If you Google this, you will find so many amazing, actually finished quilts. And what I love about it is that it's a technique called fussy cutting. And that's, maybe something if we do a virtual class, I can go in a virtual session. I can talk about it a little bit more. And my plan is actually to teach a virtual fussy cutting class through Pennington Quilt Works. So again, you can
fussy cutting. I like the sound of that.
Yeah, I love it. And I love fussy. I love it because you just get some really cool effects with it. And you can see I always have coffee with me. And so this is what I've done on it so far.
Wow.
And this is here taunting me, mocking me in my sewing room all the time. I really haven't worked on it much, but it really is a labor of love. And I really enjoy getting down and dirty with my fabrics and becoming, I get very attached to them. And I look each of these blocks as a story. That's how I think about these, is that what's the story I'm trying to tell in this particular block. And sometimes they come to me very quickly, the fabric combinations. Sometimes they're a little harder and I struggle with them. But anyway, I love this. So hopefully someday that will be finished. This is a project, I showed this briefly. This is the Brimfield block. I actually was a tester for this project with the women. It's called Brimfield Awakening. It's two women who like to go to Brimfield Flea Market, and they started finding old quilts and making patterns from them. So that was a lot of fun. And then I did that as a block of the month for Pennington Quilt Works a couple of years ago. And this is my quilt with my daughter's Crocs there at the bottom. And this is an example of each ring is English paper piece and then was hand appliqued to the background. And then I have a fabulous quilter, Block Party Quilts. Jo is the quilter, and she did the quilting for me. I wanted it to have like a garden feel to it. And then this is more fussy cutting. This was my dining room table. So you can imagine life with me. It's pretty much what it's like. And with my coffee, this time iced coffee. So that's a whole different technique, but you can see, you take fabric, you isolate motifs, and you use it over and over again, and you get what's called a secondary design. And it's really fun. And these are just a few of the blocks that I've done. And right now, actually what I was working on until we all went into the social distancing is I was hand appliquing these all to green background, and then I'm going to put them together. But I found that my energy wasn't really with that project. And I think that I've talked to a lot of people who are quilters or embroiderers or knitters, and we've had to kind of change what we're doing so that we are doing things that are maybe a little easier or that we enjoy. But I actually started pulling it out last week, and I'm excited to start working on that. And this, so this is a video. It's like 2 minutes. Can I show it? Or
yeah, go right ahead.
Okay. So this video, it actually has really cute music to it, but I can't do that right now. So
is that on your channel though?
Yes, it's on my Instagram. And so I was putting together this lecture in January, and I found I had all these pictures of English paper piecing and coffee So I put together this video of EPP and coffee, and it just really makes me smile. Actually, sometimes I find I watch it just because, that's La Colombe. That's in Martha's Vineyard. I'm trying to remember where that one is. So I kind of know a Small World of Coffee. We all know Small World of Coffee. Like where I've been, this is a set from my house. I think that there was one of these pictures was actually from when we were in London. So I love that that it's pictures of me stitching with coffee. So it makes me a little sad that I can't do that right now. I certainly look forward to the time when I can, but I really I get a kick out of it. So anyway, it's a fun little video, and I love Instagram. I think it's a really fun way to meet other people. That one's from London, actually, who also do your craft and to get inspired by them. So I think we're nearing the end here. Oh, maybe not. And were there any other questions while this is going, or?
Yeah, and I was just also going to say, I'm kind of dipping out here. So, in terms of other events, I know that we have like the crafty types. So we have started with a weekly knitting group. I don't know if we have any knitters on. I think it's on, drop in a knit. And we do it using Google Meets, which is much like Zoom in what it can do. And you get sent a link by email in the morning to make it nice and safe and secure so that only the people who sign up, I'm going to put this right in here for you into the chat. So if you're a knitter, that's the idea. And then, so that it'll be, if you wanted to see what it's going to be like. So when Marissa and I get our act together, she has a lot of projects on the go right now, like learning GarageBand.
Oh, but can I talk about my other project in a sec, or I'll let you finish talking?
Okay. We are going to, as I said, we're going to set up something on Google Meets where we can all get together and stitch together in place. Stitch in place. Sip, sip.
Yes. Stitch and stay.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Can I talk about my one little project? I'm
Yes.
very excited. Okay. So I do a lot of these groups at the quilt store, like little group events. And so I came up with the idea of doing a stitching group with one of my other coworkers, Liz. And so this is going to be a FaceTime live event next Saturday. And we're going to make these little hearts. And the idea is that you could actually make these. I'll show. I don't know if my friend is watching. So, and then you could sign your name and the date, and then send this to somebody. I know that because a lot of us aren't going to be able to be with our mothers or family members for Mother's Day. So we'll be doing this. And the exciting thing is that the designer that I love, Heather Ross, is going to be coming on with us, and another woman that we're hoping to have with us. And I just blanked her name. It's coming maybe it's coming in the fall. Janie, why did I just lose her name? Nicole Vogelsinger of Wild Boho is coming. And then, oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed. So I have 3 really famous people, one of whose name I just forgot, and I'm really embarrassed, are going to be coming on with me, and we're going to be doing a group, and we'll just be talking, and they're going to be talking about their projects and their books. And so you can go on Pennington Quiltworks website, and you can go to our Facebook page and learn more about this event. And I have kits. So if you are local and you are interested in doing that, we can have kits that you can pick up next week. Okay, that's it. Now I'm finished.
Yay. So so local kits. And so I wanted to ask, with the EPP kits, do they get mailed out when you order them, or are they pick up at the store?
So it's up to you. If you are local, you can do curbside pickup. You can order it, and they will let you know when it's ready to be picked up. And then you can also order you can order fabric from there as well. Or if anybody has questions about that, they can also contact me through my Facebook page.
Do you guys have like fat quarter stacks with a variety of materials that would help someone? Like, I don't have a fabric stash because I'm not a sewist. So
Yes.
would you can just order like random fat quarter stack so you can just get it go?
And also I recommend, there's a beautiful collection that just came in by Anna Maria. And actually this collection that where'd it go? This bag, this by Tula Pink. You can actually buy 5-inch square charm packs. And if you're working with 1 inch, you can get 4 2.5-inch squares. So you have enough you can make like 80 pieces. So that's also a great way to start. But you also, they have fat quarter packs, and they'll help you pick out what you need.
And I'm really pleased that I knew how to say fat quarter pack on
I'm
here and sound
impressed. You like have
professional.
the lingo. You know the lingo. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I've been hanging out with you for too long.
That's good. I think Kyle also sounds like she has an influence on you.
Yeah.
So.
Yes, you and Kyle are going to pull me into the world of sewing yet.
Yeah.
So anyhow, thank you so much, Marisa. This has been just fabulous. I think you've answered all our questions. If you're still here, you can put comments in there. Marisa can see them.
Yeah.
And look, we have 3 more. Oh, we had 3 more questions come in.
Okay.
Oh,
okay.
Does the EPP starter kit have fabric and patterns? No, or just the tools? It's just the tools, correct?
Just the tools. And then you need to buy the fabric. And then the resource list that I sent to Janie, we're going to send that out to people. I think it has a lot of the YouTube videos and the books that I recommend.
Right.
One that I love is, I know it's reversed, but this is English Paper Piecing by Florence Knapp. It has great instructions. And also, I say this is the book I would have written but now I don't have to. So
is that the one about the tea? She has something about tea in there? Florence tea cakes, yes.
This is Flossy Tea Cakes. This is a beautiful book and lots of great history. And this is also a good one too.
I recommended that on Twitter today. Someone was looking for some recommendation for some crafting books and different kind of crafts. And so I gave a shout out to EPP in that book. There's if you go on Thursdays at from noon to 1, there's a Twitter chat called Ask a Librarian where you can ask for book recommendations. Okay. And so I'm often on Twitter at that time, and you can ask for fiction books. You can say what you've read recently and what would be good. And so one of the ones was, I want some crafting books or a new craft to try out.
Yeah, this is it's a beautiful book and incredibly well
during
written.
The pandemic.
This is a great. This is one of my when I just want to sit with a cup of coffee and read a book, I'll grab this one.
Right. So the list of resources that I sent you is a Google Doc. I transferred it over to a Google Doc. Anybody with the link can view it. It's not a public document. It's just sent out to people who are on here. And so, but people who have been on here, and let me see, we have WPRB. Oh, they found out. Yeah. Someone said, thank you so much. Very fun and informative. This is Robin Hartman. I've already followed you on Instagram as we speak. Awesome.
Can I want to show
WPRB is not an NPR affiliate. It's an independent. It's the university.
So it's actually independent of the university. It's a foundation, but it has an affiliation with the university. But it is not part of the National Public Radio. We are really independent, private. So we do fundraise, but we also advertise.
Right. Okay. So I'm getting used to doing this crowdcasting, and Marisa, you were great. We had a lot to work out between screen sharing and phones and different points of view, and you did a wonderful job. You are now a crowdcast expert along with myself.
This is exciting. So
it is exciting.
I want to show one thing, that if you get really into English paper piecing, you can get a little crazy. And so I was so nervous today, I needed to do something. So this is English paper piecing. These are 1/4 inch tiny little pieces. And you don't do anything with this except make it and just admire it. So when you get into this, it's very fun. And this is a whole other thing, but I found today it was like very relaxing, and I was just doing it for the pure joy of it. So anyway.
That's great. Great to see someone who has such joy and passion. So we're going to sign off and say goodbye.
Yes. Bye,
and
thank you for coming.
Hope to see you in another virtual environment, and even better to see you in person soon. We really miss our community here at Princeton Public Library. And I think I forgot to introduce myself at the start. I sometimes do that. I'm Jamie. I hope everybody on here had a great time, and we will talk to you later.
All right. Thanks, Jamie.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye. Bye.